be focused on y'all, but this way, people who miss school for COVID or other things like that can get learning. So I want you to notice that point is -7, 0. Is that -7 an x or a y value?
X.
So notice this line is not y equals -7. This line is x equals -7. And that equation was 3x minus 5 equals -26. So the solution is x equals -7. So is the work for number 1 probably correct?
Yes.
Very much so. The work for number 1 is probably correct. It is correct. Does that make you feel better? Okay. So when we look at something like number 2, or I want to go back up to the top and I want to point this out in the directions. The directions say the work for 4 of the problems below are incorrect. Use Desmos.com to find the errors and fix the mistakes in the provided space. Okay? Now, there may come a time when you say, hey, I found an error, but I don't know how to fix it. Well, that's a great time to come into tutoring. Or if I'm giving you time in class to ask questions, that's a great time to be prepared to ask those questions. Okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to use Desmos to help us find errors and correct those errors. And pay attention to things. Because maybe it's something that you haven't learned yet and I need to reteach it because I missed a detail. Maybe it's something that we need to go back and, or maybe you just need to pause because you forgot a small detail that you can use stuff from class on. But this is to help us learn how to use Desmos to check our answers. We're going to use this on Monday, which is why I need you to work on it over the weekend, but I'm going to use this on Monday to establish some important language in our class to make sure we have a common understanding of what terms mean. Because I think it was even in this class yesterday, we discussed that simplify is not the same thing as solve, right? Because we talked about the order of operations, right? Simplify and solve are very different things. Well, if I say solve, you need to know what I mean by solve. If I say simplify, you need to know what I mean by simplify. So we're going to use this to establish some common language on Monday, all right? Which is why I need it done before then. Does that answer your question, Destiny? Okay. Does that answer, are there any other questions you have about this homework at this point?
No.
Thank you.
Wait, I got a question.
So if it's not right, like when they are wrong,
Yeah.
we just fix it?
Yes. Yeah. So is the work for this problem correct? If yes, how does Desmos help you, right? So explain what you saw there that Desmos helped you solve the problem.
Okay.
If it's not correct, fix the mistake, right?
Okay.
So you have the work here. Either, and what I would almost recommend is explain how to fix it, or maybe you redo the work to show how it's correct. But if you explain how to fix it, that's going to be more beneficial to you in the long run. Okay?
So if it's correct, we just don't write nothing.
Well, no. Look again at the directions on that right-hand column.
How does Desmos help you?
Yes. Is this work for this problem correct? If yes, how does Desmos help you identify the fact that the work is correct?
It shows a picture.
Okay, but use more language than that, right? How did we know that x is equal to -7?
It shows us exactly what on the graph exactly what point it was.
Okay, well, but no, it's not even just a point, it is a whole what? It's a vertical line. Notice, and so this is an important detail. I clicked on this point because it showed up, but I do want you to notice if I go to this point right here, that's -7 comma -2. This point down here would be -7 comma -4. This point up here would be -7 comma 6. That's why this vertical line, the y value doesn't matter. This vertical line, x is always equal to -7. That's why I got that solution. It doesn't matter what y is. Notice there is no y in this equation. It doesn't matter what y is, the x value is -7 to make that equation true. Does that make sense?
Okay, no matter.
Okay, so you need to explain what you're seeing so that you know that that is the solution, or that is the correct approach and answer.
I have a working process since the last time I had this class. That's like, what, 3 years ago?
Yep, so we're going to get better at it. Is there nobody there? Okay. Oh. Oh, can you open that door? I don't know what in the world that could be. What is that? Can y'all just set that along that wall over there, standing up? Do y'all know what that is?
Oh, it's saying something about like a smart board.
Oh, that's coming in today. Yeah, stand it up instead of laying it down. There you go. Thank you.
Everybody gets smart board.
Uh-huh. So it looks like I'll figure out what to do with that later. I appreciate you, Dylan. Okay. Here is the second most important rubric for my class. Kyle, can you pass these out on the left-hand side of the room over there? Ishmael, can you pass these out on that side of the room? While those are getting passed out, I'm going to go ahead and also pass out the pre-assessment that we're going to start today.
I need more.
The vertical line? I mean, as far as I'm aware, it's just called a vertical line. The blue sheet. If you can, Aaron, there's blue sheets up there. You can go grab one. And Mackenzie, you need that blue sheet as well, don't you? There's, if you look up on the table, there's some blue sheets. Yeah, that's fine. Anthony, you respect. Isn't that one of the things we talked about yesterday? Is what we need to have a good culture? That's what I thought. Nope, so both for you.
How we doing this?
Yes, because you should have written the definition of mathematics. That's why. That's fine. I would say keep that paper just so that you have the 1/100 as a reminder of what we did at the beginning. That's the other thing. Yeah. You gave it to me yesterday, didn't you? Yeah. I made scans. Yeah, so I have a record of it. Yes, ma'am. Yes, there's no sense in just sitting there doing nothing today. Hold on to it. Yes, ma'am. Say again? I'll come and get it in a second. Okay. So, really quickly, I want you to look at the green sheet. This needs to go in your notebook behind the pink active collaboration rubric. This is a rubric that I use to score literally every single math problem you do in my class. Okay? Again, let me say this. This is a rubric that I will be using to score literally every math problem you do in my class. I'm going to reposition this camera so that if they are at home, they can see it easily. Remind me to move this before the end of class so no one runs into it. All right, so this is my grading rubric. I stole the original from a professor of mine at University of Alabama, and when I say stole, he let me have it. But I have heavily modified it for the purposes of you getting feedback. So again, I said this yesterday, nothing for me will ever just be a grade. It is feedback so that you know how well you understand the math and how to improve your understanding moving forward. When you look at this rubric, where do you want to be?
5, 6, or 6.
Okay, and I will say this, not just a 6, I think a 5.5 is pretty good as well. Notice, what does it say in bold above that 6 and that 5.5?
And in but.
No, what does it say above in bold?
Clear, consistent, and convincing evidence of conceptual and or procedural
Master. If you have clear, consistent, and convincing evidence that you understand, that's pretty good, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay. The next tier is our 4.5s and our 5s, which this is still pretty good. There is clear evidence of conceptual understanding and or procedural fluency. And I'll explain what that means in a second. If you are in the 3.5s to the 4, You're looking at limited evidence of conceptual understanding and or procedural fluency. And if you're below that, there's little or no evidence of conceptual understanding and procedural fluency. And please hear me very clearly, if you score in that bottom tier, that's not me being a jerk, that's not me telling you you suck at this, this is me telling you, hey, there's not a lot of evidence here that you understand what's happening, we need to work on that. None of this is to put you down or anything like that, it is to give you genuine and honest feedback so that you can be successful. And I will point this out, there's a lot of freedom on this. You may be used to in a math class, either your answer is right or your answer is wrong, or maybe you get half credit. That's not what we're looking at in this rubric. I will point out, if you look at this rubric at the very bottom, what is the lowest score you can earn?
-1.
-1, which seems harsh. But read what a -1 is. Solution or response is incorrect, and there's no attempt to justify the response, or there's no attempt.
So
The
basically
whole
blank.
problem wrong.
Pretty much you went to sleep the other day.
Pretty much, pretty much, if you leave it blank, you're automatically at a what?
-1.
-1. If you just write down a numerical answer and no justification, or you circle a multiple choice answer and no justification, your multiple choice answer is wrong, you're looking at a -1. All you have to do to make sure you don't earn a -1 is, notice right here with a 0, the solution response is not valid, but there was at least an attempt at justification. If you tried to justify, which students were confused on this, and so let me re-explain this. When I say justify, I just mean show me something where you are explaining why or showing some work for why you are approaching the problem the way you are. Just even the detail of, well, I know that this is about quadratic functions, but that's all I know. Well, then cool, you're at a 0. My goal is to see what you know. And so I'm going to reward that, right? Notice a 1 and a 2, your solution or response is not valid, but either there's a slight or minor reference to just any correct mathematical thinking, or a 2, there's a decent start to justifying a correct answer. That's it. You don't have to be correct to earn a 1 or a 2. You have to show me that you understand something about math. Something that's relevant to that problem. Okay? Now this is what miffed a lot of students. If you have the correct answer, like you just write down the final numerical answer, or you write down the correct interval notation, or you circle the correct multiple choice answer, out of this rubric that's on a 6, you're only going to earn a 3 because there was no attempt at justifying your response. It's not just about getting an answer. It's about explaining yourself. Okay? If you are wrong, but you at least have a partially valid answer, indicating some understanding, knowledge, or a good start, you're going to earn higher than this 3 right here. You're going to be at a 3.5.
You mean like write the problem out or like word?
So there's a couple of options. Let's say that I'm asking you to, and it really depends on the type of math we're looking at. If I ask you, is this a linear, a quadratic, or an exponential function? Well, if you make a table and you show me the rate of change on the table, that's justification. If you go a step beyond that, though, and you say, hey, because I'm repeatedly or this function is repeatedly adding, I know it's a linear function, that's going to even score you higher. So it's about you showing me the evidence for why you picked the answer that you did. Or if I'm just asking you to solve an equation, you showing me algebraically the work to accurately solve that equation. Does that make sense? And so what I'm asking you to do is I'm asking you to justify your answers. You don't just put x equals 2. On that blue sheet even, there was work to show why x equals -7. Right? I'm asking you to justify yourself. And again, this is not to be a jerk. It's not anything other than I want clear, consistent, and convincing evidence that you understand. That's what I'm looking for. Or at least clear evidence that you understand what's happening. And what I will say is, and I'm going to share some of these details on Monday or Tuesday. I don't want to overwhelm you all at once and just talk for forever. Students last semester explicitly told me, Mr. Kinney, I hated the rubric at first, but I feel like the rubric forced me to learn better. Because they knew that they were going to have to justify, and because they knew they had to justify, they had to understand. And so it really forced them to learn the math better. Okay? And so my goal is to help you learn better. And I will say this. another part of this rubric, right, is I want you to justify yourself, because how many of you, and I always go back to this example, think you're going to have to use the quadratic formula in your day-to-day life? Nobody? Maybe? Depending on what you study, right? How many of you are going to use Pythagorean theorem in your day-to-day life? Maybe?
A little bit.
Maybe a little bit? So one? Okay, let me ask you this. How many of you are going to have to take information, collect information, and make a decision based on that information? Every single one of you should be able to raise your hand on that. And so in order for you to make a decision based on the information, you need to have evidence, and you need to be able to create an argument based on that evidence. That's what the justification is. So this is not just giving you skills or mathematical skills. This is giving you life skills of being able to take information, show what the evidence is, and develop an argument based on the evidence. It's a skill useful for life after high school. And that's what I'm always going to be looking at. One of the major things that I updated on this rubric actually is the bold. I used to not have those about what kind of evidence I'm looking at. I will point out I also added these things. A 4, I always said it was just an approach or response is valid, but there's a major conceptual or procedural error. Well, some students said, Mr. Kinney, how do I know if it's conceptual or procedural? And I'll explain what that means in a second. Well, I've updated the rubric so that if you see a 4C, that's a 4, but I am telling you that it's a conceptual error. If you see a 4P, yes, it's still a 4, but it was a major procedural or multiple procedural errors. Okay? And so what that means is, in mathematics, there's understanding the concept at play, but then there's also the carrying out of that process, which you may understand the concept of how to solve an equation. You may understand, hey, I need to use my properties of equality, hey, I need to use my inverses, but you're making the procedural error, the process, and you're using the wrong process every time. Well, you need to know whether, do I have the concept completely wrong, or do I have the process completely wrong? And so I'm going to give you feedback on that information. Okay? Do notice to earn higher scores, the 5, 5.5, 6, which you really want to shoot for, there's a slight or minor error in the justification, or the justification is missing significant details. Whereas a 5.5, your response is valid, but your justification is just slightly incomplete. And a 6 is you crushed it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to score every single problem on the assessments, on the homework, everything like that. And when I do those assessments, I'm going to put all of this into an Excel sheet, and I'll show you what it looks like one day. I put it into an Excel sheet and I average all of the scores. What average do you think I'm going to be shooting for, or what average do you think I'm going to usually set as a 100%? Any guesses?
8.5.
Ooh, no, sir, that's way too low.
5.5.
5.5. 5.5, notice, is the lowest threshold for clear, consistent, and convincing evidence. If you show me clear, consistent, and convincing evidence of your mastery, you know what you're doing, right? Does that make sense? So that's my 100, almost every single time. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to set a bottom threshold of a 70 is right here at a 3 usually, maybe sometimes a 2.5, but a 3 for little or no evidence of conceptual understanding. That average is where I'm looking at a 70. And so what I'll do from that is, and this is just a graphical representation. So remember I said 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So 5.5, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100. So go by 10s up to 100. So a 5.5 is going to be a 100. A 3 will be somewhere around a 70. What can I put through those 2 points? A line, right? And so using a line, so using those 2 points and creating a line, I can take your average. So let's say you average a 2, well then I can get your score from that. Let's say you average a 5, I can get your average from that. So that's how I'm going to score your assessments. This is also why I'm able to easily use tests to reassess understanding checks as well. So I'm always going to be using that system where I set the 2 points, what 100 is and what a 70 is, and I do some leeway in there every now and then depending on, if I look at it, I'm like, yikes, I did not teach this very well. I may drop those averages a little bit because that's my fault and I may need to reteach some things. But those are my general set points, and then I what's called interpolate or extrapolate your scores. Okay. Any questions? Ready for me to stop talking? Saying me too. All right. So here's what we're going to do.
Wait, I've got a question.
Yes.
What was that conceptual,
The conceptual understanding is being able to explain the concept at play, right?
okay.
So like if I were to ask you, hey, what type of function is this, right? It's the concept of, well, that function is a linear function, and then why is that linear,
okay.
right? So does anyone know why this is a linear function, by the way?
This is like,
Because it looks like a line? So kind of, that's a lower level understanding of the concept. There's actually a more important reason. You've all done this before, and I even saw some people say, I hate this thing. What am I referencing right here? Slope, okay? There's a slope to this line. And that slope, and we're going to get into this very heavily, is an additive rate of change, and a constant additive rate of change at that. And so there's the concept of, hey, there's a constant additive rate of change. And you need to be able to tell me that.
okay.
But then there's the procedural side where you may make a mistake of calculating what that slope is.
Okay.
Right? So there's the process of calculating what the slope is versus the concept of there is a slope here. Right? So those are things to be aware of. Maybe I'll give you 2 points and you have to calculate what the slope is between those 2 points. Well, if you tell me, hey, slope is x2 minus x1 divided by y2 minus y1, guess what? That's wrong. That's a conceptual error. But if you if you plug everything into that equation correctly, you did the process right, but you got this concept, the slope formula, wrong.
Okay.
So that's the difference.
Okay.
Yeah, and we'll get into more of that throughout the year. Any other questions? Alright, so here's what we're going to do. You currently have a pre-assessment. Because we're already halfway through class, I don't imagine that we'll finish. It's okay. I will collect at the end of class. I'll look over the evidence we have, and I will give you or not give you, we'll probably continue this on Monday. But this pre-assessment is actually to give me information on where you as an individual are and you as a class are. So you're going to work within your small groups, right? So Caleb, either jump up here to group 1 or jump back to group 5, your choice. It's okay. So you please notice, this is not an individual thing. You will work at your own pace at times, but you're going to work within your small groups to complete the math problems. Everything for me is collaborative. Unless I tell you otherwise, it's collaborative. You may work at your own pace, but this is collaborative. If a group member has a question, all stop their work and work together to tackle this problem. It is also your responsibility to ask questions if you are stuck. Sometimes you just need a nudge, right? And so, please hear me very clearly on this. I am going to be scoring based on active collaboration today. I will every single day, right? That rubric of 0 to 5 that we talked about yesterday and we talked about at the beginning of class. Now, I do want you on every single problem to use one of these 5 symbols. If you put a C, you're able to complete this problem without help and you're confident in your answer. And in, I was able to complete this problem without help, but I am not confident in my answer. That tells me how comfortable you are with the concept there, right? Or, hey, I needed help to answer this problem, but I now understand. Maybe you talked to the people in your group, but you now understand what's going on. Okay, cool, let me know that. Or maybe in H, I needed help, and I still don't understand. That's hey, I still need help, Mr. Kinney. And then finally in L, all in my group are lost on this problem. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay? Ready to get to work?
Yes, sir.
Let's knock it out.
Yeah.
How are you with math?
Did you,
How are you with math?
Thank you for reminding me. Hold on, I will collect your file.
I did mine yesterday.
There is a way to do it.
I don't know what mine is.
What you said?
And then you do not a negative.
Yes, sir.
So then
Thank you for reminding me.
No way, it's gonna be two.
As you should.
I might be wrong, I don't know.
You're alright.
I tried to
So we have to take
Yeah,
this,
we do
right?
2 times 2 on both sides.
If I'm correct. What would be addition?
On the both.
Yeah.
You doing it wrong, man. Can't you doing it wrong?
You just said no times two
Yeah,
on
you
both
put
sides.
2 times 2 on the bottom, and then -30. And then the top part, the 3 plus 15 stay the same. So the 2, one, like when you multiply 2, at the bottom they cancel out.
So what? No. So which one of these answers?
So we gotta write the reason why.
Oh. So 2 times -30.
Mhm.
And these are markets that have.
Pretty much.
Mhm.
To figure this out, we gotta see what's going on here. I know step 1 is that surely
Equals 3n plus 15 minus 15 minus 15.
We'll put like E.
It would be -3 by.
Yeah.
no.
And,
Just look at the number.
we gotta add. Okay, like,
The following equation for
Just work it out. What? Oh, yeah.
He said, yeah. Oh, I do.
We got you say my name?
Are you multi-level? Yeah.
Yeah, be more helpful than that.
We got to the procedures.
You said work it out.
And then I was gonna say.
Now, how you translate?
Am I right?
How you do
Easy.
I think I'm right.
Okay, wait.
So
Hold
don't
on.
forget, right,
Now I
so you
done
go
got a
distributed
different answer.
property. Tell me why.
-2.
Right, so y'all are just, yeah, you gotta tell me why it's the distributive property. What are you seeing
Let's
there?
justify account as like drawing or drawing.
You heard me?
You gotta add negatives on.
Show me a little bit more than that, but that would be part of
That's what I
justification.
said last year.
Yeah, so like that could be a 4, maybe a 4.5, I'd have to see it. I would probably be a 4, because it's not super high.
Okay, so how?
Hey, by the way, I will point out, this might be helpful to you, you might wanna get your rubric out for how I assess your assessments or score your assessments as a reminder of what you wanna be shooting for, right? So, get those things out. By the way, I will also point this out, you don't have to stay at your desk to work through these problems. If you wanna get up and use a whiteboard or use the chalkboard to get ideas out there, please feel free to do that, then just write your final decision down on your paper. You can also grab markers and write on the desk, your choice. But don't forget to justify and explain your answers.
That's a birthmark.
I'm gonna say for 15, you're adding, adding and subtracting.
You gotta be more than the effort to put in for this trying. Come on, pick up the pencil, talk to your group, that'd be at least more entertaining than just blindly staring at
I
a
could be
pencil.
wrong.
It is. And I don't know this.
I don't wanna word.
I thought I was just wrong. That's why I ain't putting that down.
I'm very wrong. I'm wrong in a bunch of different ways.
Don't forget, we don't wanna collaborate, we wanna talk, this is a practice
Wait a minute.
on that.
Maybe we were on the right track.
Step 3.